Yeah, I mean, I'm sad, angry, all those things as the last couple weeks have been going on. The one thing I am not anymore is haunted, which is interesting.
Yeah, you mean like how you would be years ago?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that I think is the gift that 2016 has given me anyway, is that this is no longer part of this, unstoppable boulder of just shit after shit after shit here.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good place to start, really.
Well, and it's interesting. I assume we've started recording, have we not?
Yeah, I was just checking the levels, but that's actually very relevant.
We just Mark Maroned it.
Yeah, exactly.
No intro. We're already recording. This is Away Games, by the way.
It
Chicago
is.
Cubs podcast hosted by two comedians who love the Cubs but don't live in Chicago. But we are talking to one who does live in Chicago. Ken
guys.
Schultz joins us again today. It would not have been right to not have you on the season recap. Whatever the hell this is going to be. Last week, recap, we're sad, talk about Madden, whatever it is.
Right, last week, Madden-y stuff, I think.
But, to that point, Ken, I think, we have a very real example of what it would be like on the other side, because if you think of the Indians, they lost in 2016 in a very heartbreaking way for them.
Yeah.
They lost to the Yankees the next year in a probably, maybe even more heartbreaking way after being up 2-0 and having that crazy winning streak. And now this is a year where they kind of shit the bed at the end and missed the playoffs by a couple games. And now think of how much of a bummer it would be to be an Indians fan. Like, the whole point is that we have 2016, but in a world where it goes the other way and then everything else happens the same as it has the last 3 seasons, I think we would all be completely despondent.
Oh my God, yeah. Like
it's just never going to happen now.
I don't think I would be getting out of bed, honestly, at this point.
I believe it. Yeah.
I would be Brian Wilsoning it and not the Giants closer. The Brian Wilson.
Yeah, going.
First reference for everybody, so keep track. Here we go.
Yeah, play the hits. Yeah, man. When people get a Schultz pod, they want to feel the full
Brian
Schultz.
Wilson is pretty mainstream. Usually, you're referencing like Renoir or something.
Well, give it time. We're 2 minutes into this damn thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It could also function as a Bare Naked Ladies reference if you're into quirky Canadian pop. And that's 20 years old at this point, so yeah, that's close to relevant.
I certainly am and was. I was very into the Bare Naked Ladies in the mid-90s, and serendipitously, the first ever Letterman show I got to see live, they were the musical guests playing Brian Wilson.
Well, that's wonderful. That is far and away my favorite song of theirs, because it's so... Well, partly it's not what you expect from them.
Right.
But it's also such a specific reference for such a sad song, and I think it just works so well on many levels. But that's, I'm sure, why everybody's listening, right?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, this is the Cubs aren't playing right now, so we're going to talk about various things, but it will be like, yeah, Cubs stuff. And I think the Ken was saying at the beginning that the positive out of this year is that he's not currently haunted by the team, which is great. And
mostly I just miss them already.
I miss them, and I totally agree, where it's like, I can't imagine, and I don't want to imagine that world where they didn't win in 2016, because it really felt like they were gonna, and it was the only time I'd really felt like that. Like, I think 2008, I guess I thought, like, they have the best team. Mm-hmm. They should win. But that was just me telling myself. It wasn't a feel as much as it was in 2016. So yeah, I would feel hopeless for sure. And it sucks for Cleveland. I mean, they won 95 games or whatever it was. Granted, they only had a winning record against like the Tigers, and then it was 500 otherwise. But it would be a real bummer.
Yeah, we own you, Joe Jimenez, or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a Tiger I know.
And to go back to that 2008 reference, one of the things that made that especially crushing that year is that, we really spent the majority of 6 months convincing ourselves that it was kind of like the 2016 team, in that it was the best team in the league. We convinced ourselves it was the best Cubs team we've seen in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And they went out so meekly against the Dodgers that there was almost a sense of, God, if this is what the best Cubs team in our lifetimes produces when it's crunch time, is this ever going to come close to happening?
Right. Well, plus the whole 100-year anniversary thing, I think kind of that through line of that whole season, I think that affected players more than they let on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so. From the moment Dempster gave up the grand slam to Loney, it was there was no recovering. And they had 3 games to recover.
Right. And we've talked about this before, but in that particular game, DeRosa hits that kind of like weird opposite field home run, and the Cubs go up 2-0. And even then, it was still kind of like quiet and like there's a weird energy at Wrigley. And I think that's been the biggest change of this generation that we're now kind of saying goodbye to as Maddon is not returning. It hasn't felt that way. It just Wrigley since 2015 has been a largely positive environment where it's not like people are just sitting around waiting for some disaster to strike. It's mostly like, we're going to be okay. Now, in a world where the Cubs are hosting Game 7 and Davis hits that home run at Wrigley Field, then it would have felt that way. But I think aside from that, I mean, it's mostly been like, we can do this. Even when the Cubs were down 3-1 to the Indians, when they were down 3-0 to the Dodgers, like it's been positive.
Yeah, and I think this week, one of the things that's such a bummer about this team and the past couple weeks is this is the first time since the Cubs got good again in 2015, or let's even say the end of 2014, this is the first time where it felt like, oh, this is the old bad Cubs, where everything goes wrong in a way that statistically it shouldn't even. Right. Like getting swept at home by those Cardinals at that point in the season with all that on the line, that felt like old Cubs. That felt like, as you said, pre-Maddon era. Mm-hmm. That felt like a different world. And I was sort of feeling that, and I remember being at the beer garden here in Astoria, like trying to not watch the last game on my phone. And then, like, of course I failed at that. And then Kimbrel, blows gives up the homers at the end. Like, I remember just being like, I haven't felt like this defeatist in a very long time. And that's nice, because it used to feel like, of course it'll go wrong when, and in the Maddon era, basically, it never did.
Mm-hmm. And I think to that point, too, is that kind of looking back on the year in retrospect, because we're stripped of that greater Cub narrative of it, this year is really viewed, I think, kept in somewhat proper perspective, in that this was just a really awful ending to a year that they had to have things go right in order to win this division. Yeah. And none of them did. And that's kind of what happens in baseball sometimes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that we're doomed to forever walk the earth barren of joy again. It just means that that's the case in 2019. Right. So, yes.
Yeah.
I think we certainly got spoiled 2015 through 2017, even though the first and last years of that run didn't end well in the NLCS. Like, just to be able to watch the Cubs play games of that intensity that late into the season, that's what I'm most sad about. Like, I felt robbed of that last year, and I definitely feel robbed of it this year. And we've all watched a lot of those games together, the three of us. There's just something different about watching your team in the playoffs, and it's so fun, even when it doesn't end the way you want it to. It's just, it really sucks that we're basically going to have 2 straight years where we don't get to have that feeling.
I miss how Wrigley looks when it's cold. And when it's cold at this point.
I have so many Cubs sweatshirts that just won't be used.
I miss that. It really is a distinctly different visual of that park as it gets colder into October and people start bundling up a little bit. And just it changes visually. And that became comfortable. And it's a bummer not to be there.
Every so often when you get to see like the ivy start to turn color, that's like a special thrill. Like this, this is a really cool year.
Yeah, we're going beyond what nature intended.
It feels like it never turned like quite the same color. In 2003, I remember, like, it was distinctly red by the end of that playoff run. And I don't think even like when they finished up with the World Series in 2016, I don't think it ever made it that far.
Right.
But yeah, just to even see like little hints of that is like, as I say, a sense that this really is a year worth remembering, at least.
Totally.
It's kind of a natural signifier of that.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's like you just want to see this group get another shot, and it feels like they won't anymore, or if they do, that it just won't feel the same. So, I'm sure that if they had won the division and then got swept by the Braves, we would have been sad about it, but you just feel like you never even got a chance to prove yourself or see what this group could do if they got themselves healthy, or if they just managed to get in, even if it was like the wild card game.
Right. And it also goes to emphasize that when you're actually going through that in the playoffs and you're going through the day-to-day giant stress burger that, 2015, 2016, 2017 were, it's good to occasionally step back and remember that, this is what we want still. And this just take like mental snapshots and go, yeah, this is a rare thing.
It's
especially 3 years in a row.
Absolutely. And it's it's easy now it's good to remember that it's very hard to finish a baseball season at the top. It is very hard. It is very hard to get into the playoffs. It's not something you should take for granted as a fan, and I think something we've all experienced on the other side of what happens after your team wins after never having won in anyone's lifetime. I definitely wondered/worried, will I care to the same level? Will I be able to reach the same level of happy when they do well? And I think the answer for me personally is a nice and kind of surprising I do give a shit. Like Ken said, there's the absence of just a lifelong haunted feeling when they lose, but oh my god, I give a shit. Yeah. And that's a lovely thing. I cannot wait for the off season now. I can't wait for next season.
Right. Yeah. If the current day's team doesn't matter the most, then why are we watching, essentially?
Absolutely. And carpe diem, y'all.
Every damn day this year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's nice. It's nice to know that you can still have that level of commitment and that level of caring without all the added bullshit that kind of seemed to go along with it up until 2016.
Totally.
Right. And I think the thing that we all are struggling with right now, as we know that there's already been one significant change in Maddon not returning, and it just feels like an offseason where we're going to have to say goodbye to some guys that we probably aren't ready to yet. I felt very attached to those first Cubs teams that I watched with Sosa and Grace and all those guys, and I remember thinking even as a kid, like, how am I ever going to care about a team that doesn't have these guys on it as much? And that's something that I've thought about with the 2016 team, is that there's going to come a day, and it might not be for another 10 years, where that last person who was on that team is not on the Cubs anymore. And it's going to be really interesting to see what that feels like for us. It'll happen gradually. It may
gradually,
be
and then
Rizzo
all at once,
8 years from now having his moment. But it's going to be interesting to see what that feels like.
Yeah. And I guess, first of all, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at awaygamespodcast. I guess do we want to get into Maddon talk now, or should we do some bullet points of just the last week of the year, those last couple games?
Well, I'm just getting word now that I think Yadier Molina suffered a paper cut, and he's charging the mound.
That's it. I mean, no one's on the mound at the moment, but he's charging anyway. That's actually the way Yadi prefers to fight, is if no one's actually there.
Just giant echoes of "Hold me back" in an empty stadium.
Oh, my God. I mean, it's Cole Hamels, and I think we've probably seen the last of Cole Hamels as a Cub, he was really great in stretches, and it's a bummer because it feels like he would have been really fun in October if he was right, especially last year. But it was very funny to watch Cole, who I think is a genuinely pretty tough guy. I mean, he's like tall and skinny, but when Yadi was doing that weird barking and walking towards him just being like, what the fuck's happening? But walking towards Yadi, know.
A slow curveball that grazes his arm protection.
Yes.
If Cole Hamels is going to go after you, ask Bryce Harper. You'll know.
Yeah, that's right. He doesn't hide it.
When did that happen? I don't remember that incident.
Rookie year, right?
Rookie year, yes.
Oh, and he said that he was doing it on purpose and probably got himself suspended.
That sounds right.
He didn't deny. It was sort of like he didn't say, "Yeah, I hit him on purpose," but he said enough so that it was clear that he did, and everyone knew he did. Which is also weird.
I am hearing some talk that Hamels may return to the Phillies for one last run, which I have no particular love for the Phillies, but that'd be kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Point in his career.
It absolutely makes sense. Yeah, given how even in that god-awful game he pitched there with the Cubs this year, given how much the fans were still behind him for that, that would make a lot of sense.
Totally.
And, Philly could certainly use more pitching depth. So that makes,
So, do you want to, Kevin, do you want to talk anything? Is there anything to even talk about over the last week of the season, really? Or
what were you going to say, Ken? Were you about to say something?
Well, first of all, just the last 3 games of the season, and I think after our collective experience down in St. Louis back at the beginning of June, I know I was looking at it and going, oh, yeah, so now you're hitting the ball.
Right.
Okay, this series is the one you picked to show up. Great.
Yeah. Would have been nice to have a couple of those wins earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Even just one, honestly. Give me something to make the 6-hour drive back home with that besides getting destroyed by Adam Wainwright's corpse.
God, that game sucked. So this year, I mean, maybe this is a recency bias. It certainly is a little bit, but I feel like it's not fully recency bias. There just were a lot of the worst fucking game this year. There was just a whole lot of contenders and a whole lot of different nuanced categories of full-on piece of shit days at the ballpark for the Cubs, and we got to see 3 of them, and that was one of I mean, I guess they lost in extras the first day, and but yeah, that third day where Wainwright just for no reason shut out.
I mean, honestly, your car breaking down was such a prediction of what that weekend would be.
Yeah, I even forgot that happened until you just said it. But yeah, my car fell apart, and we talked about it on the podcast at the time, but literally we just heard scraping in my car that we had driven from New York to St. Louis.
Yeah.
It was scraping as we were approaching on the ramp, and I was like, what's that? Maybe something with my license plate. And it was like, no, basically the whole front end of my car fell out, so I ended up waiting under the bridge in St. Louis. Game 1 until 2 in the morning, drunk for a tow truck driver who did recognize me from True TV and was very helpful. Tied my shit up with a cell phone charger. Was like, yeah, you should be good. But that was honestly, tying my car together with a cell phone charger felt like the Cubs in the last offseason, a little bit, where they're just, let's sign Daniel. The offense broke. Sign Daniel Descalzo. The end. Yeah. But as far as last week, I mean, the only fun thing, obviously, is Zobrist striking out Yachty was that. Yeah. I mean, that's,
and at least Yachty laughed about that, so sure.
Right.
He can laugh.
He can, yeah.
Okay, that's weird.
Once a year.
Yeah.
He saves it for the last day.
Yeah.
I guess one thing to mention about the last week before that kind of ties in actually a little bit to going into the offseason. Ian Happ, congratulations.
Hell
Player
yeah.
of the week.
NL Player of the Week.
Yeah. Also, Ian Happ, in his couple months back up in the big leagues, has drastically improved contact rates, especially in the strike zone. So, yeah, maybe something took in the few months in Iowa.
It seems like it. I mean, the strikeout, I saw the stats. I don't have them on me, but I think his contact rate or his strikeout rate went down like 10% from last year or a touch over.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it in the season preview that Ian Happ's really only problem is that he was literally the worst in Major League Baseball at hitting balls in the strike zone, which seems like a problem, and it was.
Kind of what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, his contact rate in zone is also dramatically improved by at least 10%, I think. I checked on Fangraphs before we started this up. And so larger point about that improvement, and then with the 2-month-long stretch of just drastic improvement from Schwarber in terms of both contact rate and hitting the ball the other way and still keeping the occasional Schwar bomb as part of his arsenal. So we know, and we've heard Theo repeat ad nauseum to this point, that development and progress aren't linear with hitters. And these are still 2 relatively small sample sizes, but might we start thinking that, hey, maybe this is a bit of that nonlinear progress finally starting to show up with some of these guys?
I think so. I mean, it's with Schwarber especially, I think, because it's just... you've seen the ceiling flash with Schwarber from the beginning, right? And with both those guys, they made improvements that you can see tangibly in the stats. You can see in the contact rate. You can see in Schwarber going the other way. So it's not just it seems like it would be really weird if it was just a random hot streak for just because it ended up that way without any thought behind it. It seems like this is an approach that settled in a little bit. Yeah. And with both those guys, and I think, Schwarber, I guess Happ too, and Darvish are guys you just wish could start the next year exactly right now, But I'm a big believer. I feel like Schwarber, I just put him in left field every day for me. I'm very excited about what he can do next year. And Ian Happ, the Ian Happ we saw up at the major league level, that is a great, 9th position player out of 8 to have on your team. Or, I mean, as the roster is currently constructed, I want to see him in center field most of the time.
Yeah. And so branching up from that even. Now we know, and Theo said many times during his press conference yesterday, that change is coming and change is on the way to this roster.
Yeah.
And with this idea in mind, I just want to throw out, be very careful with some of these guys, because the stats are showing that, especially Schwarber and Happ, they're starting to turn.
You don't want to trade a JD Martinez.
Right, exactly. That's a great comp. That is the ultimate worry, is that you've committed to their development for so long and believed in them for so long, and you might prove it might be proving you right, and you don't want to cut baits at the time it's proving you right.
Yeah, you don't want to be there. You don't want to absorb all the bumps and then deal them when they figured it out. Absolutely, and I think I think that's a thing that I think all three of us worry about. Is you hear all this talk about all the change coming to the roster and all that, and it's like you really need a couple of pieces for sure. I think at least one real major piece going into the next year, but there is a lot of talent on this team, and I think, are all three of us not happy with the Joe Maddon non-resign?
Before we jump into that real quick, I was just going to ask you, Kevin, because you mentioned wanting to see more of Happ in center.
Yeah.
I think the thing that concerns me about that, and again, anybody who says Schwarber is a bad left fielder hasn't watched the game since 2015.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't.
No, especially in the national media, apparently.
Right.
But he's not a great left fielder. So if you have him in left every day, which is what you want, if you have Happ and Hayward in center, like if you sign Castellanos, if that happens,
that's a bad defensive outfield.
That's a very bad defensive outfield.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that concerns me the most.
Yeah.
Is that I would love to have Castellanos back in the mix, but I think that really concerns me.
It's a consistently and that's something I think. If anything, that might be how we see things get reshaped.
Yeah,
here, because those are a lot of great and I like Happ. I like Happ fine in the infield most of the time. He dropped 2 pop-ups in the infield this year, and I'm not sure I saw anyone else drop 1 the way he dropped 2, which is weird for a guy who played mostly outfield the last couple of years, that being the problem. But we've seen him look very good at third. We've seen him look fine at second base, and seen him look pretty good at first. I think if it's obviously the super hack thing to talk about, like, the new Ben Zobrist or whatever. But I think Ian Happ is someone I would like to see getting most of it, like a lot of at-bats moving around the infield, more than in center. It's just like, Jason Hayward's definitely a better center fielder than Ian Happ is. It's just, you'd like some offense, basically.
Right.
But I don't know. So I think we're saying about we all would have preferred a re-signing of Maddon, correct?
Yes.
I certainly would have. Even I don't know if he would have accepted it, but at the very least, I would have liked for them to give him like another year or two, and say like, we don't want this to end this way.
Like a 2-year deal. Well, and basically, the reason I bring that up before we go full into Maddon is that I think so much of this, with the development we've seen, even if it is largely the same roster, I expect them to win more, just with a progression to the mean, kind of. And so we're going to see whoever replaces Maddon. I think very likely the team does better, and then there's a narrative about like, oh, this new manager's really lit a fire under their asses and stuff. And whatever. I hope the new manager does light a fire under their asses, whatever the fuck that means. You know what I mean? Great. But I do think this is a roster that is I think it's very good for the most part. It's got major holes that should have been addressed before.
Yes.
In last year's offseason. But as guys like Happ, guys like Schwarber really seeming to come into their prime right now, I do not want to get rid of for, 90 cents on the dollar.
Yeah, so to the point of this roster still being very good, in researching a baseball prospectus piece that I've submitted and I'm hoping to get up sometime in the next week, I took a look kind of at the past 4 years of just like the basic Cub slash lines as a team, 2016 to now. And there's, little bits of variation from, especially slugging based on, juiced ball years and not.
Sure.
But for the most part, it's the same basic offensive profile as 2016. And if you go into a little bit of the advanced numbers, both in terms of ops plus and weighted runs created plus, again, 2016 is not that much better than this current group right now. Like 2016's ops plus was 104. This current group's at 100. Mm-hmm. So in terms, 2016 was 4 points above average. This group right at average.
Right.
The difference and why it feels so different now is that in 2016, the only team that significantly outperformed the Cubs offensively that year in terms of the advanced metrics was the Boston Red Sox. Whereas now you have the Astros, Dodgers, Twins, Yankees, and A's all far, far and away in excess of what the Cubs are. So this current roster is good,
right?
But it was also constructed to solve the problems of 2016 baseball.
Right.
And we're now in an era where we have, especially with the juice ball, these 5 elite offensive rosters. And that's kind of the separation to me between where the Cubs are now versus where we perceive they could be.
Yeah, it's like everybody caught up and then jumped over them.
Right.
Yeah, and that the Cubs haven't grown in the way, guys who are good have stayed good, but they haven't grown at the percent, they haven't gone with inflation, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we get into to the real deep Maddon talk, should we pause to talk about our sponsor?
Of course.
Kevin?
Yeah, tell us about it.
This is for Bill Hicks fan Ken Schultz. All right, we are sponsored once again by Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a new DFS app for prop bets. They have streamlined the drafting process and eliminated the need to do unnecessary hours of research by using only top-tier athletes. So instead of the traditional salary cap format, you build your lineup around a list of prop bets. Each unique prop has an over and under point value assigned to it, and you'll be rewarded that point value if that prop is correct. And if you use promo code AWAYGAMES, that's all one word, AWAYGAMES, you'll get a free $10 bonus with your first deposit of $10 or more. We will share the link and all that, but check out Thrive Fantasy.
Yeah. Link, perfect read.
Getting better every week.
Yeah. Adam is improving with the pace of the league. He is not falling behind. Weighted ads created plus is really off the charts here. And people have been using at Thrive Fantasy. They've been using the code AWAYGAMES. We've been seeing it. And when you do that, you actually support the show and make it more likely that Adam and I won't quit next week.
Exactly.
That is that's so you're helping out everybody. Thrive Fantasy, the code AWAYGAMES, and you get free money, 10 free.
I mean, Theo did refer to the podcast as he said it broke.
He said it broke, and I can't argue with that. Theo said it broke. He took responsibility for it, and then he fired someone else. So that is exactly what happened.
I interject at this point and declare this podcast off the artistic roll call.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Sorry. Yeah.
We had so much integrity.
I know.
Based largely on no offers of ads.
Yes, exactly. And now we're creeping towards solvency. Yeah. All right. So,
where were you flying back from Seattle when the news broke, and then saw a flurry of texts when you got back?
Of Maddon?
Maddon,
yes.
Yeah.
So I was flying back from Seattle this weekend and landed to the announcement that that Maddon was not coming back, and obviously that had been how things looked like they were going for a long time. I mean, really since last year when they talked about not extending.
It felt like unless they won the World Series, he wasn't going to be back, and I don't know how that it turned into that, but didn't it kind of feel that way?
There are some people, even Sahadev, I think, is saying that even if he had won the World Series, they might have just said, "Okay, we're kind of done at this point, and
That's crazy."
Yeah. So I don't know. They certainly have not made it specific as to if Theo needs to be changed, but yeah, there is that definite sense that something had to be different in order for them to go forward in Theo's mind.
Some real galaxy brain business shit, if that was the case, and obviously it's not, but that would have been really interesting to see 2 world championships in 5 years and be like, you know what, we're done here. Are ya? I don't know. I will say this: there is, on one hand, the manager has to be somewhat responsible for the results, because otherwise, why do we have managers then? If they're not going to be tied to that in some way, okay, fine. And this was the worst year of results in the 5 years for the Cubs, so I understand that. I do not believe that there's a great chance that we get a better manager next time, because there haven't been many better managers in the last 30 years of baseball. I mean, than Joe Maddon, who took the Rays and the Cubs to the World Series. I can't remember a time when a manager was not retained with a team when it seemed like he clearly wanted to. And Maddon says there's no bad blood and could not have been more, magnanimous about everything and very Madden-esque going forward. But I can't remember a time when it seemed like the fan base at large, for the most part, was less panicky reactionary about a manager after a subpar season than the front office was. Like, a lot of people on Cubs Twitter, there's plenty that did want to see Maddon gone as well. But I think a lot of the people that we interact with and follow seem to be sort of where we're at on it.
Right, and it's not as if Maddon or his managing was, beyond reproach. Obviously, there are things that he did throughout his tenure that... It's one of those things where it's all results-based. So if you win 103 games, everyone's like, oh, he keeps everybody so loose. That's why they won so much.
Right.
But if you're winning 84 games, it's like, well, he should have been more disciplined with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to play that sort of game. But the thing, I think the biggest knock on Maddon, at least from Cubs Twitter perspective, was like, oh, he doesn't know how to handle the bullpen. And that may be true to an extent. But I got news for you. Whoever the manager is next year, people are going to question what he does with the bullpen. It's just how baseball works. Every fan of every team questions moves that the manager makes.
And it's hard to say that it's hard to handle the bullpen well when one of your first options to get guys out is David Phelps.
Yeah.
Nothing against David Phelps, but seems like he should be like your in case of break in case of 2 innings kind of guy, as opposed to, we've got to get out of this Bryce Harper situation or something like that.
Right. It's more of like a Travis Wood spot or something.
Yeah.
Certainly, obviously back when he won the World Series, he had a lot of bullpen moves that I think people were rightly furious about. And I don't think he's been, I don't think he's been extremely above average as a manager of a bullpen either. I think that has been a weakness of him. And then you think about the things this year that people get most mad about. The leading off of Almora was weird. It happened 15 times, I think. Which is, roughly 14 too many.
Dusty-ish.
Yeah.
Almora is the type of guy who you'd think of as a leadoff hitter, so therefore,
Right.
And we were this close. Maybe the only thing separating it was Maddon at the end of the year claiming that Almora saved our season.
Yes. Wait, who did Dusty say that about?
The infamous Nafy saved our season, dude, at the end of 2005 when the Cubs finished in 4th place.
He saved them from being in 6th place, I guess.
Yeah, I do remember that quote. But yeah, I thought it was Nafy. God dang. Yeah, it wasn't very much like center fielders lead off kind of thing. That, and then Derek Holland ever facing a right-handed hitter. Yeah, but. As a thing I've said frequently is I do think Joe Maddon is just about the best manager over 162. When you average everything out, when you talk about getting the best out of his players, and I don't really know what else I want a manager to get out of these players when you look at them individually. I know Maddon said that one thing that was different this year, he wished the guys hung out with each other more, and I'm a little curious what's up with that.
Cue the Keenan song.
Yeah, what up with that? What up with that?
Didn't you mention there was something between like Contreras and Baez?
Well, there was some talk about like them not following each other on Instagram.
Oh shit! That's a 2019 emergency right there.
Yeah, they were.
That's why the collapse. That explains everything right there.
Yeah, Jeez. They were. I think about a month and a half ago, they were not following each other on Instagram.
That is the old El Mago versus Thanks God and Abuelito rivalry that goes way back.
It's a babyface matchup, and that's not how this kind of thing is supposed to work. There's no heels here. So yeah, there was talk about that. There's, obviously there's the losing Zobrist for so much of the year hurt. It seems like that was a real leader that brought the team together. I've read wild rumors about that too, which
I have too, and I don't even feel like we need to.
Nah, I feel like unless that's really proven,
no,
I'm not buying it. But I am curious about it. And that you could say is something of a manager's thing, but these guys are grown men. Like they're going to bond or they're not. So I don't know. I'm really bummed out to not have Joe Maddon, and it is very understandable to me. That seems like every team is ready to fire whoever they have to get Joe Maddon.
Mm-hmm. And wouldn't it be something if he takes Mike Trout to the World Series next year?
I would love it. Honestly, if he manages the Angels, they will immediately become like my second favorite team because I already kind of like them. Like I like Trout a lot. I like Ohtani. I literally bought tickets to a Yankees-Angels game to see both of them, and they both didn't play, which was annoying. But I got to see Severino's comeback. Woo!
All right.
It was fine.
He throws some.
But, yeah, and also if Listella comes back, that would be cool. I wouldn't be surprised if Zobrist signs like a one-year deal with the Angels just to hang out with Maddon. It could be that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I read someone floated the rumor about the idea that the Angels would possibly make a move for one of the Cubs' 2 catchers. I mean, I don't know that the Angels really have enough to make a move for Contreras, unless they're including Joe Adell in the deal, and I don't know that they would. But yeah, I think as fans of Maddon, I think to me that's the most fun storylines if he goes back to where it began for him.
Yeah. And to not have to deal with him being like in our division or something, which, I don't think he's going to go manage the Pirates, but
right.
It's like the Angels or Padres seem to make the most sense in terms of like a team that's kind of where the 2015 Cubs were. Right.
And then, I mean, the Giants are not on the way up, but that's like, it's a very good organization with a smart guy at the head now. They have to do a lot of work to get back to legit. But
is Bochy retiring, or did they just say we're not extending you?
They let their Hall of Fame manager retire.
Cool.
And give him the kind of send-off he deserved.
Exactly.
You're mentioning the Pirates, Adam, makes me think, God, there's a small part of me that thinks, wouldn't it be fun if Maddon took over the Pirates next year and then somehow they doubled their number of hit-by-pitches?
Yeah. It's just, what happened here?
Can you imagine going from Clint Hurdle as your manager to Joe Maddon, though? How drastic a change that would be?
The lack of racism in the clubhouse for one. Just, like... The players wouldn't know what to do.
Just walking around like something's missing here this year. Can't quite put a finger on it. That would be about the greatest wins above replacement as a manager jump as you could probably have. Clint Hurdles, who had 5 winning seasons out of 17, for Christ's sake. How do you get 17? Joe Maddon had 5 and 5 and isn't coming back.
But I guess couldn't you say the same for Scioscia?
That he had that many losing seasons. He had a lot. I don't think it was that big a split.
He did win a World Series, obviously. But
I think with Hurdle, it's a case of if you time those few winning seasons just right. Like one of those winning seasons, I think, was when the Rockies made the World Series.
Right.
So he probably had an extension due like a year or two after that, and they thought, hey, great, pennant, you're re-upped.
Mm-hmm.
And then again with the Pirates, I think like the end of his first contract probably coincided with all those years when they won the wild card.
Right.
And again, the first winning seasons in 20 years there, so they thought, yeah, great, he's our guy.
That's true. Man, what lucky timing. That's I forgot that the Pirates had the longest streak of losing seasons until they had a couple of good ones.
Yeah, it's just weird that some teams handle managers like it's look at the Angels. I mean, it's one and done for Ausmus, and then there's other teams that seem to treat their managers like a Supreme Court appointed.
Right. And I think the right way is probably in the middle somewhere, obviously, like with most things. But
it's longer than 5 years.
Yeah, it's 5 years, and these 5...
We are never going to see a Cubs manager manage for longer than that in our lifetime.
I can't imagine how we...
Make it, who is going to do that?
Oh my God! I cannot. That's a great point. And the whoever's coming in next is probably very aware of that. You know what I mean? They have to be thinking like, all right, this is a short-term deal. Unless you're literally just winning every other year forever. And then I guess also it's like Theo's not forever for this world, right? I mean, most of it he's talked about it being 10 years and out, and he's got another couple years basically, and then that's it. And who knows whether it'll just be Jed sliding up or whatever. But
and by the way, you missed it because you're listening to us in your ears. But I just left for a second to turn the lights on because while we were talking, we slowly vanished into darkness, and Ken couldn't see us, which is kind of another perfect representation of what this season felt like.
It felt like us.
I was about to say, with the lights out, it is less dangerous.
Yes. Do we have opinions about who we want or don't want to see managing the Cubs next? Any other Maddon thoughts before we get to that?
I will miss his press conferences very much.
I wanted to get out there that I think kind of branching into a Theo Maddon thoughts that Theo's has the quality that I think everybody who runs a team has in some capacity, that he just can't stand losing. And when it happens, he wants to do everything he can to make sure it doesn't happen next year. And oftentimes that's a real good quality to have. Obviously, in a competitive industry, that's what you want. But there are instances, and I think his handling of the Maddon situation is a big one of them, where that is also his biggest weakness to me, is that sometimes he sees losing and thinks something has to change. I have to change it. I have to do something drastic. and he does it because he has to do something drastic, as opposed to thinking, is there anybody out there who is definitely better than the guy I've got?
Right. I totally agree. This is the first move of the Cubs tenure that I thought from Theo. Basically, he's made plenty of missteps. You take a lot of steps if you're running an organization. You're going to take some missteps. This is the first move I've ever thought felt like him grasping at straws.
Like an overcorrection.
Yeah, I think it seems like he let the narrative run it that they didn't extend him, and then he got it in his head that things needed to change from the manager spot down. Also, I mean, you look at the coaching staff, and coming into this year, none of the major coaches were Maddon picks, really. It was all front office people, so it's not even like Maddon really was running his full own dugout. Basically, the front office, they got Butterfield here. They went out. Iapoce was someone from the Cubs organization before. Hotovy, obviously, and Loretta as a bench coach too. It's. I think this is him grasping at straws, kind of like Ken says. He can't take losing, and it's well, let's change this. And again, I think the way you look at it is, could we get a manager better than Joe Maddon? You can. You almost surely won't. Mm-hmm. And I was saying in our Facebook message chain all about the Cubs that he better know who he's picking already.
Yes.
I don't want this to be an open. He was in his press conference. He was talking about, well, there's certain things I don't want to say because then when guys come in to interview, you have to be careful to not hire the best interview. Man, you don't fire Joe Maddon if you're waiting to hear guys in ties come in and give you pitches about what, this is the kind of manager I will be. You better fucking know who the person is taking the next step. With a lot of job searches, you want people to go in open-minded. In this case, if we're getting rid of Maddon, I don't. He better know.
Well, according to our pal Charles Meow,
he's been on a cold streak.
He has, but the rumblings are that Ross and Girardi are the two main people who are being considered.
Why is Girardi in that?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's and you were asking Kevin, do you have any strong opinions about who you want to be hired and not hired? I feel strongly that I don't want Joe Girardi to be hired. I don't see how that's a good move. That's like the anti hurdle to Maddon. That's like, now you've gone from somebody who had petting zoos at the stadium to somebody who's kind of a hard ass.
Right. And especially at the beginning of the year when they had the temerity to make suggestions to Joe Maddon that he needs to understand millennials better. I know out of anybody to be saying that too. Yeah, he's older than Girardi, but not spiritually. And I also saw I think a fair point on Twitter. Someone was saying, a lot of Cubs fans wanting them to hire David Ross, but not wanting Joe Girardi, who has won a World Series and has all this experience and all that. And I think it's a fair point because experience shouldn't be a bad thing. But I think we kind of know who Girardi is, and I don't think he's a bad manager. But I very much don't think he's the guy to next level up this team.
He would have to demonstrate that he understands why the Yankees got rid of him after going to Game 7 of the ALCS, and make a commitment to making sure that he doesn't treat the Cubs players the way he treated the Yankees at the end of his run, because especially with a team that is used to Joe Maddon, that's going to get tuned out immediately.
Absolutely. And a team that's been mature, has had success, and in doing it their way for the most part. And they didn't have success this year, but I agree as well. Even though I can see an argument for why people might be interested in Girardi, but I don't have any interest in Girardi. I would be really bummed out if it was him. My top three picks that I would be interested in seeing are Ross, Raul Ibanez, and Carlos Beltran.
Yep,
are the three that I
those
have
last two
any
are
interest
people
in.
that I feel like a bilingual manager would be a great thing.
Yep. And they're guys who specifically, throughout their playing careers, and David Ross included, throughout their playing careers, people talked about them as great leaders, as future managers. These are guys who it's not sneaking up on anyone that these guys could be good at this. And sometimes people do sneak up and it works. Like Aaron Boone has turned out to be
or Alex Cora, who obviously was a bench coach, but
right.
Still.
But yeah, those are really the only three guys I have a major interest in right now. And also, it's a weird thing to be saying who you want to manage because who the fuck knows. But yeah, How about you, Ken?
You can't throw out Aaron Boone and Alex Cora and then say, well, that means that a guy taking the reins for the first time ever as a manager is going to do well.
Right.
Logic works.
Yeah.
What about Jeff Garland?
Oh, hey.
Yeah, we need someone who talks more than Joe Maddon. Yeah.
Anything to get him to stop visiting the booth.
Yes, I would.
No, he would still go up during the
game. he would manage from the booth. Unfortunately,
I was just gonna say, thinking about Girardi, the way I think about him, it reminds me. Did you watch SNL this weekend?
No, I have not.
There was a Woody Harrelson was portraying Joe Biden in their debate sketch, and there was a great line that I looked up where he goes, "I'm like plastic straws. I've been around forever. I've always worked, but now you're mad at me." That's kind of how I feel about Joe Girardi.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's like he's had success. We've known about him, and then people are like, "Boo!" Yeah. Yeah. So who are you interested in, Ken? Who would?
Ryan Sandberg.
You want Ryan back?
Yep, going down. Yeah,
so
my wagon to that one.
His struggles and the way things ended in Philly for him don't deter you, or is it purely an emotional?
That is entirely sarcastic and ironic.
Oh God. Okay, I didn't know. I mean, you love Sandberg, so
I wanted Sandberg when it went to Quaddy.
Oh God, yeah, I would take Sandberg over Quaddy in a heartbeat all day, every day.
Yeah.
And Sandberg was in a situation where there was no way what he was going to do worked in Philly. But
what exactly went down there? I kind of forget now.
Very, very classic example of a team that was definitely at the end of its run, with a very popular manager, wanted to try to change things up at the manager's spot just to see if they could extend it 1 or 2 years, and Sandberg and those players did not mesh at all. He and Rollins had conflict. He and Utley had beef and it kind of quickly devolved into they're going to lose 90 games, and he was miserable. It was kind of the ultimate be very careful what you wish for, because you might get it sometimes.
Right. And he got to check that box. He's a major league manager, but it seems like he's enjoying. I'm enjoying his Instagram stories from Wrigley when he's watching the game. It's funny he'll be taking an Insta story of the game happening, and you'll hear him cheer from behind the phone.
I just think if they go with David Ross, you got to go all in on like a Legends coaches lineup. Like you got to I'm going to need like Kerry Wood or Ryan Dempster as the pitching coach. I'm going to need some other person as the bench coach.
I mean, Mark Pryor's a coach. He actually has a lot of coaching experience. I do like Hottovy, and it does seem like one thing that does make me think that it is trending towards Ross, even though it seems like Theo almost went out of his way in the press conference to say it isn't necessarily, is that I do think the Cubs plan to retain this coaching staff besides Maddon. Yeah. And if they are doing that, it makes sense that Ross, who has been in the organization for a couple of years now, right, in some aspects, and it would make more sense that he would be on board with that. These are people he knows. He's had some. He at least has some sort of relationship with this coaching staff, as opposed to a manager coming in for the first time who doesn't know that. I mean, they would rightfully want to bring their own coaches, I think, or at least have some say in who's being hired.
Right, and I think one thing about Ross that's intriguing is that from everything I've read about him, and I think there's even a lot of stuff about this in that in the Cubs Way, the book that Verducci wrote, that like he was the guy to hold people accountable on that team. Mm-hmm. And so if that's what the Cubs say they're looking for, is someone to be a little harder on guys or maybe hold people a little more accountable than they perceive Joe to have done, then maybe Ross can be that guy.
Yeah.
That's the hope, I think. I think that they want to hang on to the coaching staff, if only because they've made so many changes in that over the past 3 years.
Yeah, what are we going to have, a fourth hitting coach in 4 years?
Yeah. At a certain point, it just becomes, come on, guys. Just pick a guy and stick with it for a couple of years.
That's how I felt with the Bears and offensive coordinators throughout the Jay Cutler reign, where it's like you never had the same guy 2 years in a row, really. You know, it's like Gase and Martz, I think, maybe for a couple of years. But besides that, it was always, it started to get good, then they would leave, and then it got worse, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like in a lot of ways it does. I mean, they also said they're gonna interview one of the other people on the coaching staff, right, for the manager.
Yeah. On Twitter, just before we started, they were spreading. So from internal candidates, it's Ross, Loretta, and Venable.
And Venable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's the first for his name thrown out.
That's interesting.
The venerable Will Venable.
Yep. First base coach.
Princeton, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Prince, and you know they love that shit.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The Ivy Boys.
And I mean, Loretta
Brown.
Loretta's Northwestern.
Theo, I think you misinterpreted Cubs fans' love for Ivy.
Yeah. It's a slightly different thing. No Cornell is a request. But yeah, that's really interesting. I saw someone talking. I forget exactly who, but someone talking up Will Venable before I saw what Ken's referencing. So that's interesting as well.
I've seen the Astros bench coach mentioned a few times. What is his name?
Is that Hensley Mullins or no? Is that someone else?
No, I can't remember.
It's not Mills, is it?
No,
I think it's a Hispanic guy. I can't think of the name.
Yeah.
So that's one of the names that I've seen tossed around. I think that was like one of the only ones that they said, like, you know, if that were somebody who were being considered, obviously they would have to probably wait a bit. But I don't really remember how that works.
Oh, Espada, right?
Espada,
yeah. 44-year-old, a 44-year-old guy who's also mentioned as a leading candidate. Yeah, Joe Espada also mentioned as a leading candidate for the Mets job if Callaway's fired.
People have mentioned DeRosa, too, and I'm not too high on DeRosa.
I think DeRosa's fine on the MLB Network. I really don't get. I also don't get the constant floating of DeRosa as a managerial candidate because I watch the MLB Network.
He doesn't seem particularly insightful to me.
Mark DeRosa's biggest asset seems to be affability and a bit of a thirst trap. So, manager, then. Yeah, I wouldn't complain.
Yeah, that's it. It seems like I don't even know that he wants the job, but it's weird. That is one of the names that you do see floated. And I saw on the thirst trap for me, saw the Vegas betting odds on these managerial candidates, and DeRosa was pretty high up on the board. I do not think that's going to be the case. The other thing about hiring a guy from this coaching staff to me is then what the fuck are we doing moving on from Maddon? If we're just promoting one of the guys who was also here all year in the dugout.
I don't think that'll happen. I have a feeling that because of the fact to exactly that point, I think that they're going to have to go somebody who's a little, not to overuse the word, but a little sexier, like a little. Yeah. If they sign Ross, if they sign Beltran, if they sign somebody from outside, I think it's going to be. People will be more excited about it and more okay with Maddon not being back versus like, okay, cool, now Will Venable's our manager.
It's hard to, I think. Yeah.
If that's the qualification to be Cubs manager, might I suggest British Olympic diver Tom Daly?
Really change it up.
If we're going sexy, let's just go full on balls to the wall sexy.
Full on sexy.
Very much intended, please.
To keep the balls off the walls. Go straight like what was it? The Browns hired Paul DiBattista to be their GM. A baseball guy moving over to football. There we go. That's that move. You bring in Olympic diver. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a lot of candidates, and who the fuck knows? Because Joe Maddon wasn't good enough for the next 5 years going forward. And
I just hope that it happens sooner than later because I don't want to hear about this longer than we need to.
Yeah, I'm pretty good on. I don't need a really long managerial. I think Theo did say something in the press conference about this won't drag out, right?
Right, because I'm sure he wants to start making serious changes to the roster, and you've got to get the manager taken care of before you move into that.
Yeah. So really it seems like, I mean, it could definitely drag till the World Series is over. Mm-hmm. I mean, because there are candidates that are still involved with these teams. Beltran, I believe, is with the Yankees in some way right now.
Yeah.
And then Espada with the Astros and et cetera. But so it could, but this is something that we should have settled, I don't know, a month at the latest, I guess. I would like it settled earlier than that, but yeah. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I got.
You're better than any of us, any sentence we've spoken for the past 50 minutes.
Yeah. In conclusion, go Nats.
Yeah.
Hope the Nats win tonight.
I guess by the time this goes up, we'll know.
Yeah, A's and Rays I have literally no rooting interest in. But
I want to see Billy Beane finally get something. It'd be nice. This is the year his shit finally worked in the playoffs.
I think.
Yeah, I do feel kind of bad for them. Like the way they lost to the Royals that year, the game that Lester started, which it's so weird to even remember Lester on the A's. It was such a brief time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the A's are due for a nice little run.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, rooting interest the rest of the way, I guess, is a good. It might as well close it off that way. There is technically baseball still happening. Yeah, I think I'm A's. I think I'm A's as well in the AL. I get A's. I mean, I tend to when I have a tie, I tend to go with what team actually has fans, and neither the A's nor the Rays draw a lot, but the A's have some very intense fans.
They do.
Yeah.
So and Billy Bean, it would be. I also like it when teams and people that deserve it get one. So I guess A's in the AL, and then in the NL. God, am I rooting for the Nats? I guess
Nats or Dodgers over anybody else, I guess.
Yeah.
The Braves are pretty likable.
Yeah, there are definitely players in the Braves that I would like to see in the World Series. I wouldn't want to hear that chant for 7 games.
Correct. I mean, if it's Yankees Cardinals, I'll kill myself.
I'll tune out. I would. I don't know that I would watch a game of that. Yeah. But yeah, I think we'd really be bad at booking. For ratings wise, like give me an A's Nats. But and Dodgers. So I got no real love for the Dodgers, but just the same thing I said about being like I like when people who deserve it get one. The Dodgers have been very good.
How sad will they be if they lose again in the World Series? Oh my God!
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll see.
They could be the Bills.
That would be a very 1950s Dodgers move.
Yeah, just to lose a bunch in a row.
Keep in the World Series and keep losing, because that's what they did for about a decade before they finally won in 55.
Was it Yankees pretty much every time?
Almost the Yankees, too. It was every single year the Yankees, which would just drive you insane if you lived in Brooklyn back then.
Oh, my God.
I'm rooting for Dexter to hit 1,000 and the Cardinals to get swept.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that's ideal.
Sounds great. Thanks for joining us, Ken. Tell anything
as always, friends.
Anything to plug beyond the usual on the way out?
Just the usual. Look for me on Prospectus and OutSports. Twitter at Ken Schultz _ Instagram at Ken Thin Guy.
Okay, I might be a podcast guest of yours soon.
Yes. So OutSports is telling me that I should podcast. So
hey.
Yeah. You are both invited on. Kevin and I might be doing something this week. Adam, now that we're recording, I will invite you to next week's podcast.
So, guys,
I will only talk about Tom Daly.
Oh, yes. Here we go.
Suddenly I've been bumped to week 2.
Real miracle-ass move.
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys want to listen to me and Ken or Ken and Adam ever talk to each other, man, there's going to be an opportunity for you to do that in the future. So thank goodness. Follow Ken at Ken Schultz _ on Twitter as well. You know where to find Adam and I, and we are at awaygamespodcast on Twitter, Instagram. Anything else, Adam?
Nah, go make some bets on Thrive Fantasy.
Yeah, Thrive Fantasy.
Yeah.
Go to Away Games. Pay us. Thank you.